Hey guys, it's another day today, and we're going to start up. We started up a little bit late, trying to get everybody organized and going. Today, I have a lovely guest, Chrissie Hodges. She has similar OCD to what I have, but we're going to talk a little bit about relationships, friendships, and the effect that mental health has on those. Because I know there's a lot of questions out there, and there's a lot of us that struggle with that. There's times where I don't answer a text right away, and then other people take it personally, and we're going to talk about that. And then the other dynamic of just, trying to have a relationship and navigate through a lot of things. So thank you for joining today. And let's bring in Dr. Diane McIntosh again. Hi, Diane. How are you? Welcome.
Hi, Corey. Hi.
Welcome back. We missed you yesterday. We had Glenn Metropolitan, a good friend of mine. And we talked a lot about masculinity and stuff, and we talked a lot about Glenn's issues growing up. And one of the things that did come up yesterday that I wanted to bring up with you today was with Glenn. Post-career, both of us, it's been tough, and we've had to at times set aside our egos. And sometimes our ego can get in the way of us doing us from what we want to do, because we both played in the National Hockey League. And all of a sudden that's gone. We will never get paid again to play hockey. So it's hard to set your ego aside that you were once, hey, you're Corey Hirsch, or you're Glenn Metropolitan, or you're Wayne Gretzky, or whatever. All of a sudden, setting your ego aside and doing what you need to do is a tough thing to do, but it's extremely important, and how ego can get in the way of us getting done what we need to do. So we talked about that, and just your thoughts on the male ego, or the ego in general, getting in the way from us doing what we need to do.
You're asking me about the male ego. How much time does everyone have? I think what the important point there is the fact that anytime you're in the midst of a life transition, that's a challenge. And particularly when it's such a massive life transition. So we know, moving from not married to married, or, having a baby, these are huge life transitions. And moving from NHL star to no longer being an NHL star, and trying to navigate that path is challenging for absolutely everyone. We know people when they retire, right? The challenges that they finding their new journey that they're starting. If you're not prepared for that, if you haven't done some transition, or if you are suffering from a mental illness, that makes you particularly vulnerable to those times. So a lot of that is about preparation. I think the focus on egos, everyone's got an ego, but if you haven't prepared for it, if you haven't planned for it, and you're already a little bit vulnerable, it makes it a much greater challenge.
Yeah. Well, and I guess I asked that because through this, we're going to get some people and some issues where, after we're going back to work, there's going to be job loss. There's going to be things where people are going to have to do what they need to do. And they're going to have to set aside their ego that they were making $200 a year doing sales or something. Now they're only making 70, or, a pay cut. And that can be, mental health wise, that can be detrimental on your ego and your self-worth. And how do you avoid that? Or how do you set that aside if that's something that you're going through right now out there?
Yeah. And I don't think that's easy, because it's not just that it hurts your sense of worth, your sense of value, but it also has a very real impact on your ability to feed and clothe yourself, make sure that your kids have the things that they need. So that it's a really difficult question. And, we're in the midst of this horrible pandemic experience, but we know that the economic fallout will probably be more deadly. And that sounds like a terrible thing to say, but the reality is that financial pressure is massive. If you're not able to get the basics, or to give yourself or your family what you think that they need, that has a massive impact on your mental well-being. So we absolutely are in a challenging place from a viral perspective, but the economic outcome, not just in where we are living, but across the world, is going to have a massive impact on all of us.
Yeah. Well, and that's well said. And my advice to people is that, yeah, it's hard, but don't let your ego get in the way of taking care of yourself, your family. And that happens a lot, especially with males, because again, and females, everybody, we all have pride. We all have ego, but do what you got to do. And who cares what anybody thinks? I've had jobs and done things that I haven't, really had to set my ego aside. And Diane, I do have a big ego.
What?
Not bad.
Oh, that's a great time to drop that on me.
I'm good. I think I'm pretty humble, but you never know. But I am going to bring in somebody who is one of my favorite people, one of my favorite friends. She's larger than life. She's a huge mental health advocate. She's the author of this book, Pure OCD. We have the same type of OCD. She's a huge mental health advocate in the world of mental health and OCD, and we're going to get her thoughts on some things of what's going on, relationships, how to deal with what's going on right now. And welcome to the show, Chrissie. How are you?
Woo! I love how right after the ego conversation, you're like, yeah, egos. Now let's bring in Chrissie, who probably has the biggest ego.
He did call you larger than life.
Yeah, that's you don't.
My hair is larger than life.
I wouldn't call it an ego. I would call it a big personality.
Well, hey y'all! Thanks for having me on, Corey.
Yeah, well, we've done your show quite a number of times, and I am loving your hair right now. I want that is COVID-19, and it is awesome. I wish I could have that.
I am the poster child right here of COVID-19.
We had some good news here in BC. They're going to start opening up a little bit. They've done a really nice job. You're in Colorado, Chrissie. Just what's going on there with the with COVID-19 and how you're coping with things yourself with OCD and mental health?
Well, we've not to plug, but we've been doing these fireside chats for OCD Game Changers, my nonprofit, and it's been really. We started the week that everything shut down, and it's been really cool to be able to follow the emotional roller coaster people have experienced through all this. And so this week I'm doing okay. It depends on the week. It depends on the day, sometimes the hour. I've gotten to a point now where it's the new normal has sort of normalized, even though I'm still fighting it because I don't want this to be the new normal. And part of me is refusing that this is going to be the new normal for me. But what I've done is just tried to really throw myself into, supporting my clients and being there for them and, just continually communicating with Sean, my husband, and just being able to connect with friends, because I didn't realize how important human connection was. I did realize it, but I didn't until it was taken away. Even just the routine of going to the grocery stores that I normally and seeing the same checkers and being able to be like, hey, what's up? And now like we have this barrier with these masks. I don't like it. I don't want it. I can't conform. You know me, Corey.
Yeah, I know. Now we have glass between us and the grocery people, but and just as far, you brought up human connection. So today I want to touch a little bit on relationships, friendships, mental health, what's going on, and I guess we'll just start with you, Diane, and just say just about how important it is for somebody that does I'll internalize. Sometimes I'll go silent. Right, if things are bothering me, just Diane, just if you could just discuss how important that is to stay connected right now to your friends, to your family, even though you feel like retreating inside. What's something someone can do that if they feel that way, they can kind of break out of that shell a little bit and just send a text or whatever.
Well, I focused on the term rather than social distancing, physical distancing, because yes, we can't be really up close to other people, but social distancing, as Chrissie just mentioned, it can be devastating for people. And as both of you know, the impact of mental illness on your functioning affects your relationships, right? It's not just that you can't work as well, you can't partner as well. You can't parent as well. So some people become a lot more isolated when they're depressed and anxious, whatever they're experiencing. This can be quite devastating when it's sort of imposed isolation. And if you're already on the edge, and people who are already struggling with a mental illness are more vulnerable during this time of chronically high stress, this can really push a lot of people to retreat even more. This is why for those who love someone who's living with mental illness, this is the time to reach out, to make sure that you make those social connections, because we're physically distant, but that social distancing really does, I think, do a number on a lot of people who are quite vulnerable right now.
Chrissie, so how do you and you're married, and how do you and Sean deal with when one partner, is kind of goes distant, and how do you guys deal with that dynamic between each other? What's the best route that you guys have discovered?
Well, I think that we're lucky where we both experience anxiety. Not that I don't mean that we're lucky, anxiety, but I have OCD, anxiety, and he experiences depression and anxiety as well. And I think understanding the dynamics of what it's like to live with anxiety just helps us on how to communicate, and it becomes less.
No, you're good.
Oh, I was like, oh no, where did everybody go?
I'm still here.
Okay. I think it becomes less personal. Like, we don't take it personal if someone is going to feel distant, or if someone is acting a certain way or experiencing something. So one of the things, and we still work on it, but one of the things that we try to do for and with each other is, if we notice that the other is on edge or has certain behaviors or is being very quiet or withdrawing, we definitely ask each other what we can do to support one another, versus what's wrong with you or what's happening and I want to fix it. It's more, I know you know what you need, and so you need to tell me how to help you. Because it's often when you are supporting someone with mental health issues, we can think that we know best for them. I know what's best for you, or I can save you, or let me give you advice, when that is not necessarily what you should be doing. I hate the word should, but that they don't deserve that. They deserve to be heard. They deserve to be supported in the way that's going to be more helpful for them, versus you imposing what you think should be helpful for them.
Chrissie, I love what you just said. And I think as friends, people sometimes want to help, and sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, the two of you, that when you're connecting with a friend, you maybe don't want them to see you through the OCD lens all the time. It could be, I just want you to be my friend. I don't need you to save me right now or help me right now. What I want you to be is my friend. So what you said, I think, is really powerful, which is ask your friend, what can I do? What can I do to help you? What do you want me to be right now for you? And sometimes it's, I need you to call my doctor, or I need you to drive me to an appointment, or give me some extra support, or just listen. But let your friend drive the truck here and tell you, this is what I need from you now. And it might not have anything to do with your mental health. Maybe it's just, I'm your friend right now, and I'm just going to be your friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've had relationships ruined because of my mental health. I mean, I'll be flat out honest. And it's, it's not all my fault 100%, but Chrissie, I said this to you many times. What I love about your relationship with Sean, and he's such a good dude, is that he gets that you have OCD, right? Like so what I've realized is that I need somebody that understands that I have mental health issues. And if I'm out there looking for a partner, I need somebody that understands that, there are going to be times when I struggle, and that, it's not just hey, I don't understand your stuff. You got to go or whatever, right? I need a partner that knows about mental health. And what I've realized is that I have to be open and honest and talk to somebody when starting a new relationship or in a relationship, that I can't hide what I have from them. because when I do, that makes them feel like they're taking it personally. Or if they don't know, that can be really detrimental to the relationship. So, Diane, how important is that to be, to communicate to your partner, and you don't have to divulge everything, but just the communication with your partner about your mental health issue.
I have these conversations all the time. I'm interested, Chrissie, in your thoughts as well. But when, do you write that in your Plenty of Fish or whatever, one of those apps, I'm looking for love, but I'm mentally ill. Is that a starting point? And I have these conversations often with my patients. And the reality is that most people have something, either it's them or someone they love. There is no one who is not touched by mental illness. You either have it yourself, someone you love or care about, someone you work with, a great friend. But when do you have that conversation, Chrissie? When do you think that the time is to the big reveal, I have OCD? When do you do that in a relationship?
Well, for me, I was already out there, a mental health advocate and a certified peer support specialist. So that was on my Tinder profile. So
Got it.
I figure people need to know up front what they're getting into. And I get this question often too from clients that I'm supporting is when do I tell and how much do I divulge? I always defer back to Corey's line. Your story is yours to tell. But I also think if you are involved with in a romantic relationship, yes, this person needs to know to a degree. They don't have to know every single thing. And when it comes to OCD, often our obsessions can be really taboo. They can be really scary. People don't understand them. We're really ashamed and embarrassed. So no, you don't have to tell people I don't want to know everything about Sean. Let's just put it that way. But to some degree, outlining when you're not in crisis, outlining with your partner, this is my pattern of behavior. This is what happens when I am in crisis. And here's what you can do to help. And outlining that whole plan before things even happened. So before I even with Sean, we didn't really talk about it on the first date. We made out a lot on the first date. Yes, it was love at first sight. But with him, it was a gradual conversation about what it's like to have OCD. I left it up to him if he wanted to know more. And he was just one of those people that did some research on it. And then we just had, even just sharing my story, my backstory about it gave him some information of what it's like to live with OCD. And then, yes, the first time I had a bit of an OCD crisis, we'd already talked enough to where he knew he shouldn't be interjecting and being like, oh, let me save you. And let me, I know what to do. It was more, what do you need me to do? Do you need me to back off? Do you need me to come be with you? What do you need? And then I was fortunate enough to have the confidence to be able to communicate to him exactly what I needed. So in relationships, I think it's important to figure out what you need when it comes to mental health, but also take into account what your partner needs when it comes to mental health. So if you're with someone that doesn't have a mental health diagnosis, they might be scared and might not know what to do. And so ask them what they need when you're struggling to come up with that plan before you get into crisis mode.
Yeah. Go ahead, Diane.
I think OCD is one of the most challenging. It is the most challenging that I treat, honestly. But it's also a really difficult one to teach about and to teach someone else about or talk about because it looks different for every person. So Corey introduced you as saying we have a similar OCD diagnosis, but everyone is different. And as you know, trying to learn about that, this is a difficult time for a lot of people with OCD who have contamination issues and concerns about germs. Well, I talked to Corey about that and he said, well, it's not a really big deal for me right now. Most of my OCD patients are finding that really challenging right now. So trying to explain to someone, so you can have these obsessions, you can have compulsions, you don't have to have both. They can be about everything under the sun or absolutely nothing. They can be, it's a really complicated diagnosis to explain. So I can imagine in a relationship starting slow. What do you need to know? I can tell you a little bit about me, but it can look different in different people. And not only that, Chrissie, Corey, this, it changes over time. So some people will have particular obsessions right now, and in a few months they'll change completely.
Yeah, and that's, you know, like I've had, I've learned that, you know, through some tough relationships, that I have to be open and honest, because if I'm not, that relationship is not going to be, it's going to go south. So I've worked really hard. I have a significant other right now that I've worked really hard on trying to be open and honest with. What she struggles with, I know, is that Chrissie, when I get into, like, she calls it like the storm, right? Where I'm in my head, and I just kind of just shut down and walk away, right? Where I can, and this can last like a day or two. And I work really hard on limiting the amount of time that it takes to come out of it. And I've had a lot of therapy about that, but she doesn't know what to do in those times, right? And she'll come to me and ask me, you know, what can I do? And I don't want to talk to her. I don't want to talk to anybody, right? Like, and it might not even be her but she starts to take it personally, right? That she's done something wrong. Yeah. So how, for a partner out there, how do you I wouldn't say teach them, but so that they don't take it personally, right? And it doesn't affect is that on me, the person in it? Is that on them, just to understand that this is the communication? Like, what does that in your relationship look like, Chrissie?
If you are in a relationship that you are committed to, and a long-term relationship, it's on you both. So we can't put the blame on one person or the other. And in fact, we don't even want to use that word blame. You know, if anything, communication is, for me, communication is everything. It is everything. Corey, you and I are so much alike. When I am in it, that's what I call it. When I'm in it, I don't want anything to do with anybody. I want to isolate. I don't want to talk. It's probably the worst thing to do, but it's just a coping mechanism I've had since I was 8 years old. So it's going to be hard for someone to break me out of that in the first 24 hours. Yeah. And so for me, even though I am completely wrapped up 100% in my head trying to solve something that's unsolvable, I also need to think about where Sean is when this is going on for me. I care about him. I don't want him to feel like this is his fault. I don't want him to feel like that I don't love him. So I try just to update him periodically. Today, I'm probably not going to want to talk. I'm going to be really distant. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with however much I'm willing to share. And I'll check in with you later today. If I check in with him then, it might be me crying because I feel like I'm a burden and he should be with somebody else, and yada, yada. But my goal is, through what I'm going through, that he doesn't feel at all threatened in the relationship. So after I have cycled through something, we sit down and we say, what works, what didn't work, how can we change things up? You know, one of the things that we really do and we do well is, if there's an emotional outburst, we talk about what happened and what we can do next time. And I would have, like, Sean can sometimes get, so when he gets wrapped up in something, he starts to yell, not at me, but like he just yells and he gets so emotionally overwhelmed. And after that happened, at one point, he came back to me and he said, okay, because we talked about, what do we do when you get in that position? Because it's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for me. It scares me. It scares him. And we brainstormed, and he came up with, okay, next time that happens, I want you to say this to me. And so when that happens, it hasn't happened since, but when it happens, I will remember he told me to say this. I'm going to say it to him, and we'll see what happens. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll sit down afterwards and we'll figure out what to do next. Mm-hmm. So that's how we communicate. It's, when something happens, let's sit down and talk about it and figure out what to do and how to support someone, especially in the moment of huge emotion.
Yeah. So it comes down to communication again. Diane?
What I would ask you, Corey, the point that you made about being in a storm, if I were in the role of your psychiatrist, would be to ask, do you know when those storm clouds are starting to form? Is there anything that you can do when you feel that? Because to me, it's almost like having an aura before a migraine or before the onset of a seizure. For some people, they know it's coming. I can feel it. And sometimes if you get tuned into your body and the way your brain patterns are. And, that's really difficult when you're really young. And OCD often starts when kids are quite young and certainly within their teen years, that it takes a while to get to know your brain and your body. But Corey and Chrissie, both you've lived with this for a long time. Are you able to, when you really think about it, identify what starts the storm clouds forming? What does that look like? How do I feel? Are there ways that maybe I can strategize? You might not be able to stop it the first time, but the second time when you feel that and you start to identify it, what are the precursors? What might be able to help me to move through this more quickly? And to Chrissie's point, start the communication then. I mean, obviously you have very strong communication skills. Not everyone does, unfortunately, particularly people who lived with a serious illness for a long while, have had a lot of challenging relationships, maybe not met the right person to help them guide them through, a psychologist, psychiatrist, peer support person who's actually lived through it. So I think learning those communication skills, trying to identify as early as possible that storm cloud is starting to form, and starting to listen to your mind and your body, and try to build some skills around identifying earlier rather than later.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that too. And ultimately, if it's something that you are really struggling with, we all have a therapist or another friend that we can talk to that can help get us out of the storm. Sometimes I don't want to talk to my partner about it, right? So I want to talk to somebody like Chrissie. That I'll call you every once in a while, and I'll be like, "Hey, I'm struggling with something in my relationship that I just don't feel like to kind of get out of it or get an understanding that I don't feel like I want to talk to my partner about it. I need somebody, a different outside voice, with that in a relationship. And you've been able to kind of guide that with me at times. So, it's important to communicate with your partner, but sometimes it's okay to look at, somebody that goes through the same thing as you and understands you. And then, I have a therapist and that I can call, that I can make an appointment with or whatever, that if it gets to that point that I need to recognize that it's bigger than me and my partner, that to do it sooner than later, because what I've learned the hard way through, having my heart broken a couple of times, which really sucks, and failed relationships, nobody wants that, is that, don't let it get in the way of going and getting help quickly, to the point where it's taken so long for you to figure out, oh, I need some help, and your relationship's already damaged, right? Mm-hmm. But and as far as sometimes, Chrissie, you said it too, it can take 24 hours for me to get out of it. I can feel it coming on, Diane, and sometimes though it hits so quickly that I don't really have time to adjust to my partner. But is there a way, Diane, I'll ask you this, to reduce that time? And this is probably more of a therapy question than, what can I do to reduce that time? Is it talking to somebody? Is it calling a therapist? Is it talking to a friend? Like, what are some things that I need to do and Chrissie could do to reduce that time for our partner? Because it's hurtful on our partners. We know that.
Well, I think just to go back to the point where, Corey, you reach out to Chrissie for support. Obviously, she's a critical person because she gets it, she's lived it, and obviously you guys are really close friends. But it's also important just to make sure that your partner knows that Chrissie's there for that reason, because that, we're talking about being hurtful. Corey's reaching out to, his beautiful friend, and, what does that mean? Why can she help you through it and I can't help you through it? So there's a huge amount of communication that has to go on there, so that it's a recognition of what you're getting from Chrissie, that from your partner, you get an intimate partner kind of love. And this is another kind of support, and we need different kinds of support. As far as making it through those difficult periods a little more quickly, I think that trying to identify if you have triggers. Not everyone has triggers. Everyone is triggered right now, but sometimes when Chrissie was saying with these sort of, I'm the ups and downs just of having a chronic mental illness, is recognizing sometimes what is it that pushes me. I think OCD is more challenging because some people often will say to me, I have no idea what happened. I am here now and I don't know what got me here. And unfortunately, as we get older, the longer we've had a mental illness, the more vulnerable our brain is to those dips. that we are, because this is a brain illness. It is not a weakness, a failure. You're not lame or lazy or anything like that. This is your brain and how your brain structure and function works. And so as you're further along in your illness, you do become a little more vulnerable to being hit out of nowhere and not being sure why that's happened. But I'm guessing, Chrissie, you spend a lot of time talking to people about trying to understand and listen to themselves, trying to get a better sense of how your own brain works and what those triggers are, which could be subtle, but often if you can identify them, that can help you not to spend so much time there. Because once you're in it, Corey, I'm sure when you're in that storm, it's really hard to dig you out of it. And you feel like, okay, get away from me. I got to get myself out of this. And it's just time. Whereas if you know a little bit about why and put some skills in place about confronting some of those negative thoughts, or even recognizing, because I do this thing, you're in a negative circuit and you get caught in this cul-de-sac of OCD where you're having that obsession over and over and over again. How do you get out of that cul-de-sac? Sometimes just visualizing what's happening in my brain and recognizing I'm in a cul-de-sac. I can't get out. I'm spinning. How do I get myself back on that main road? Sometimes just visualizing that can help you find your path. Chrissie, I'd like to know what you talk to people about on that front.
Yes, and thank you for communicating the severity of OCD. It's always good to talk and share with people just how devastating this illness can be. And to your point, or on top of what your point is, OCD is very much about patterns. And it's also, for people that maybe don't know, OCD feels so real. I can sit here and worry that I'm, what if I turn into a pedophile, or what if I turn into a violent murderer? And Sean can go, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But he doesn't understand that when you are in it, everything around you points to the fact that it could be true. And so, but also in managing OCD, it's behavioral patterns, which I, in my life, had a breakthrough with kind of what we're talking about in this storm, is recognizing patterns of behavior. So when we're looking for clues on, like Diane was saying, when we're looking for kind of the clues of when I feel like I'm on a break here, I feel like something's coming on, it's also important to be really mindful of what's happening during those 3 or 4 days. And what are some of the things that are going to come up? Is it shame? Is it guilt? Is, like I said earlier, my default is I am damaged goods. Why is Sean with me? He should be with someone else. And I spiral through that for hours and hours, sometimes days. But once I started recognizing, well, every time this happens, I feel the same way. The same emotions come up, the same feelings come up, the same fears of, because OCD is also very black and white. So when you're in it, you think it's never going to end. And then when you're out of it, you're like, relationship's great, it's never going to happen again. Yeah, well, there's the OCD black and white thinking. So what I've started to do is just recognize what those patterns are. What are the emotions that come up? And then if I wake up and that day the storm has hit, I can think to myself, okay, I should expect to feel this way today. So then when it hits, I'm not knocked over. I just experience it in a way that I have experienced it since I was 8 years old. Because when you're not surprised and you're not shocked, it's easier to get comfortable in those really heavy emotions that can just drag us around on a leash. And I also remember, and luckily I have great people in my life that remind me of this. Your emotions are not always going to stay the same. And, just hang on through the day. Tomorrow you might feel different, or you might not feel different the next day. But what can you do to get as comfortable as you can while you're in the storm? How can you take shelter so you're just not getting drenched?
Yeah. And for a man, for me, I can recognize that it's coming on, but it takes a lot out of me to tell my partner and open up to my partner. It really does. And I don't know, I think females are a little bit better at that than men are, but our masculinity kind of keeps us from being, but the result of that for me has been failed relationships, right? So what's the trade-off here? I can either have a failed relationship, or I can, try and work through this and communicate, because a failed relationship it sucks. I mean, there's heartbreak, there's all those things. And I don't want to go through that again. And also, again, like I said, Chrissie, I'll reiterate, having a partner that understands doesn't necessarily have to understand mental health, but the fact that, I'm going to go through what I go through, and that I need support and I need help or whatever. But there are a lot of times that I struggle recognizing it. But it's not only OCD, it's depression as well, right? I mean, I can feel it almost coming on, before it even comes on. So it's really important for me to communicate that with my partner. But a lot of our partners too out there, and I'll start with you, Diane, is a lot of our partners out there, they don't know how to approach, when their partner they can see it coming, right? And when my partner approaches me and goes, "Oh, I can see your OCD coming," that pisses me off. Like it doesn't, right?
I'm like, yikes.
This isn't my damn OCD, all right? I'm pissed, all right? You know what I'm saying? So it puts me deeper into that hole.
Deeper into the shame too.
And it makes me want to even withdraw even more. So how do you approach a partner? And it doesn't even have to be a mental health issue. We all deal with depression, anxiety. How do you approach a partner when you can see something kind of they're going through it that doesn't make them withdraw even more?
Didn't we talk about that the other day with Alexa, Corey, with the, partner? I will say universally, the thing that my patients have told me they hate most of all is, did you take your medication?
Oh, Lord have mercy. No.
Have you? You're not yourself. Did you take your medication? And, like universally. And so, but Corey, looking back to early relationship, I will say personally, the thing I hate the most in life that I refuse to do is regret. I try to make sure that I forgive myself for my past me, which is a gift I give myself. And then today I'm going to start again. And with new relationships, you have to, first of all, forgive yourself for your role in the past, but also to remember that you were young. You didn't know what the hell was going on. Your partner didn't know what the hell was going on. You're trying to find your path together. And you ended up there because neither one of you knew what to do. So now your brain is mature, you're more mature, you've learned more about yourself and about your illness. So starting a relationship with as you have, being open to everyone, I've got OCD, this is what it looks like. But when you know what you hate, when you're starting to get sick, having those conversations like Chrissie was saying beforehand, okay, when I turn into that hairy monster that everyone doesn't like very much, particularly the one who's sick, me, then this is how I want you to approach me. Can we work on that, right? Not asking, oh, I see the OCD monsters coming, or did you take your medication? More, you can help to drive that, Corey, saying, when that's happening, this is what works for me. If it doesn't work the next time this happens, then let's work on how we can make it work better the next time. Chrissie really nailed it. The other thing I want to mention, Chrissie, is what you said, which I think is powerful. And it sounds so simple, but I had to learn this myself. I don't suffer from a significant mental illness, but we've all had anxiety at times, and anxiety is horrible. I think doctors tend to poo-poo anxiety. Oh, it's the depression we need to worry about. It actually has a massive impact on suicide. It's not the depressed patient, it's the depressed anxious patient. So we got to pay attention to anxiety, and it's horrible. And I remember in the past when I've been anxious about something, like really anxious and feeling very worried. And I learned this from someone, and I've been able to incorporate it when I make myself think, you know what, this feels awful right now, but it is going to get better. Usually when I think this is the worst, right now, this is the worst, somehow it starts to come up the other side. It's that recognition of my feelings are going to change. I'm not always going to be like this. I'm really upset right now. I'm at the grocery store and something's happened. Rah, 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 rah. Your emotions will change. And teaching your partner that too. Because when I'm dealing with someone who's really upset or angry, if I start wearing that, if I wear you're upset, then I'm going to be upset and I can't be helpful. So I'm able to say to myself, you know what, that's you. This is me. You're having it. I understand why you feel this way and you're really upset. But I also know in my head, you're not going to be like this forever. This is going to change. And somehow that is freeing for me.
Mm-hmm. and I just want to emphasize before, thank you for saying that, because the whole med thing, like, y'all don't be asking people if they've taken their meds.
My God.
Like, if you're a doctor and you're in an appointment, fine. Don't be asking your family and your loved ones. Stop.
I'm
Stop.
allowed to say that. No one else is.
Unless the person communicates to you, can you remind me to take my meds? There you go. There's the communication.
Yeah.
And just to piggyback on that, Corey, with every reason, you have every reason to feel frustrated and upset and retreating when someone does bring up your mental illness. I can see this happening, because then all of a sudden it's, lots of us, our defenses go right up. And then we get put back in that position of when we first found out we had a mental illness, and what does that say about us, and the internalized stigma and the external stigma. So it is very important and within your right as a person who struggles with a mental illness to say to somebody, do not ask me this. Please do not approach me this way. You can say 100% verbatim, please don't say, how's your OCD? Like, I don't reference OCD at all. If that's how you feel, fine. But then some people might want their parents or their loved ones to check in with them every day and ask how their OCD is. The important piece here is we need to be mindful of our own triggers. We need to be mindful of what can send us into a spiral, and we need to communicate that to our loved ones. If our loved ones decide that they don't care and they're going to say whatever the hell they want, that's the deeper issue. We're not talking about just mental health then. But and I also want to, though, make the point that sometimes, again, just to go back to my point that I made before, people don't know how to support you until you tell them how to support you. Someone may have just grown up in a household where you just freely say shit all over the place, and it isn't that big of a deal. So giving someone else also some grace when you communicate, it hurts me when you say this, and then maybe they mistakenly say it once or twice. Yeah. Continue to have that conversation with them of, I want to emphasize yet again, why, when you say this, it makes me feel this way, and really giving them a description of, what you just said, Corey, what it makes you recoil, it makes you feel small, that's right there. You want to tell a loved one, when you say this to me, it makes me feel this way, it makes me see myself this way, here's something better you could ask. And give them, come to them with solutions, come to them with a way to open up even more communication.
Yeah, no, that's very well said, Chrissie. And that's something that I'm still working through myself too, is finding different ways to communicate. Because, and also sometimes with my partner, it can't always be blamed on my mental health issue that every time we have, a disagreement or an argument, right? So when you automatically go there, that makes me retreat as well. So, because you're going to be in your relationship, you're going to have disagreements. You're going to have, times where and it's not always, OCD related or depression related, but your partner, I can see where they might think that. And it's very fair, because that's, is what they don't know when I'm in one or when you're in one, unless I communicate that I am. And I guess as difficult as it is, that's on me to communicate that. But,
I have something to say.
Yes, please go.
So again, just to emphasize, this is, if we do know that OCD might be a factor here, again, that's a communication point with the partner to say, because it is fair if someone is worried, if Sean's like, oh God, something's, when the pandemic, Sean's like, oh my gosh, Christy might spiral down, or what if she thinks this? So again, making that communication clear of what are appropriate things that Sean can ask me that isn't going to send me into a spiral.
Yeah.
Coming to me and saying, listen, I know that change is hard. I know that, the pandemic has been really hard for people with anxiety, and I just wanted to check in with you. That is not going to trigger me, because it's kind of like that safe way of asking. But if he comes to me and is like, wow, how's your OCD doing through this? Then I'm going to be like, no.
You're starting to look depressed.
Yeah, you're looking kind of depressed lately, Your hair's out of control lately, and that's what happens when people get spiraling symptoms. No, but again, right there is the open door to say, here's a safe way to approach me. But and I'm going to respect that. And then, you know what? If it doesn't work too, talk more about what a better way to communicate is.
Yeah. And this is a tough conversation to have in the sense for men, because I'll be honest, I was taught not to open up to women. Not taught that, but that was the perception that I got of what a man is, right? Like I shouldn't say I was taught that, but guys used to make, you'd be having a deep conversation with your girlfriend and in high school or whatever, and you'd come back to the guys or whatever, and they'd be kind of like, "Oh, what were you talking about?" So you get that perception as a man that you're not, that's just not cool, right? So it's years of layers of that, and so I think over the course of time, I've learned that was just such a silly way to it's being a man is opening up and talking to your partner. I think, and again, the cost of it is failed relationships, divorce, failed relationships. So, communication, it sounds like ultimately throughout all this with relationships is such a key component, and it's everything in a relationship. And I speak from the male side of it, but, and what's something we can do, Diane, as men, moving forward that, I guess would help us with our masculinity and relationships, setting our ego aside. We talked about at the start of this broadcast, just something out there that I guess can help. And it's not even men. There's women out there that don't feel like they can talk to their men, right? It's like, it goes hand in hand.
This is a whole other show.
We can do better. Yeah, that's a whole other show. We'll have you on again.
But Corey, I think what you said, the last point is true, that there are men who are closed and women who are closed. And most men were not taught to be like that. They were modeled to be like that. They modeled other people doing that. And so it became the way to be. And so I don't think it is male or female. It may be more often men and less often women, but I think it is what you've modeled, what you're comfortable with. And just by listening to the two of you talking about it, the communication that is required here is hard work. And when you're down and when you're anxious and when you've got life that you have to deal with on top of that, taking the time to work through that communication, it's a lot of work. So no wonder people have challenges in their relationships. So I have to explain exactly how to approach me in times when I'm not feeling quite myself. Everyone has to be committed to that process. And, so there's love, obviously, Chrissie, in your relationship, that you guys spend this much time trying to sort out what's the best way to approach me, because I love you and I want you in my life. So, when you approach me with, how's that OCD going? And here's some Lysol, that's going to really set you going. But if you approach me in this way, I'm going to be much more tolerant of it. And, that's going to really help me. I think we have to acknowledge there's a lot of work that goes into being able to effectively communicate. The other thing, Corey, that from a male perspective, and I'd like to bring it back to an everyone perspective, is the importance of boundaries, teaching our children how to create appropriate boundaries around ourselves, within our relationships. And that's very hard. I think, men and women are different there as well. Women, and these are, again, sweeping generalizations, I think struggle more with boundaries than men do. Men are a little more clear about things. And that, again, may be modeled. So we have to, as parents, teach our boys and girls to be open, to talk about what we need and what's not okay for us. And learning to create those boundaries, so much harder to do when you're an adult and you're trying to be in a work situation or create relationships outside your family. That is a skill, to learn how to create appropriate boundaries within relationships and to communicate effectively. As parents, we need to teach boys and girls to do that.
Mm-hmm. Chrissie, you and I have talked about boundaries with OCD, and I know it's OCD heavy today, but even with anxiety, I have a tough time with boundaries. I do, because when things are on fire, I've learned a survival instinct that boundaries don't exist. And that's not a good way to live, because it affects other people. And Chrissie, you and I have talked about that too as well. Just setting boundaries with mental health and your partner as well with mental health and boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Diane, thank you for bringing that up. Boundaries are harder as adults, but I think that as you get older and really settle into who you are and forming your values, you start to recognize the importance of boundaries and how, if you're not expressing boundaries and respecting other people's boundaries, it's harder to have a healthy relationship. And it's also, I hear, I work with clients all the time that on this very topic, my parents always ask me if I'm taking my medication, yada, yada, yada. And I try to help support people in having, even role modeling. Let's role model a conversation on asking for boundaries. And people are terrified. They're like sweating and all red, and so scared. But at the same, when you're setting boundaries with people, you're basically just setting up a communication of respect between the two of you. It is, I respect myself enough and I care about you enough that this is where things end for me, but I want to tell you why. And, people, especially with OCD, because we're all like, oh my God, if we do anything, we're going to hurt somebody. We feel it's getting over that wave of the initial, if I set boundaries, I'm being selfish. But what you're really doing is you're not letting people run all over you. And that also helps stop the cycle that we get in of the self-esteem and the, pushing into the storm. Corey, like we were mentioning earlier, and you were asking, setting boundaries are exactly what you were asking earlier, talking to someone before the storm hits and saying, when the storm hits, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, I would really appreciate it if you didn't ask me this. I would really appreciate it if we could, I would really appreciate if you would tell me what I can do to make it better for you. So that might seem simple, but that right there are boundaries. And that's what makes a healthy relationship. It sometimes feels like if I set boundaries, then that limits the relationship. Nope. It opens it up. It actually helps you explore even more of a depth. And just really quickly, to talk about the male-female thing. Again, this is a whole other show and I love it. But first of all, it's the vulnerability piece. And I think male and female, it's so scary to be vulnerable. And I think Diane hit it on the head. It is more a modeling. It's more modeling. And a lot of times that's cultural. A lot of times, it's economically, it's, all of these factors contribute on why someone can and can't be vulnerable or chooses that I try to remember. So if someone is not being vulnerable, they're protecting themselves. They're trying to protect themselves. They've learned it somehow. And so how do I dig around that to help them feel safe? Because yes, people are, male, female, people are reluctant to share their feelings, but we also have a responsibility in our relationships to dig a little safety hole, and cushion it and be like, I'm going to help. I'm not going to shove you into there, but I'm going to help show you that if you fall into vulnerability, I'm going to create a safe space and that you're safe here with me. So I think it's on both people. And also remembering that we as a female in this relationship, I also can't perpetuate stereotypes about males. Sean is super sensitive, but he's afraid to be vulnerable at times. And so I can't ever push those stereotypes of saying, well, you should be the man in the relationship and you're the one that, why are you crying all the time? He doesn't, but I'm saying if he did, I also need to be really careful not to perpetuate that stereotype as well.
Yeah. You guys realize I'm a dead man after this show, right? You are giving fuel to my relationship. It's all great. It's all good. This is great stuff. Thank you both for sharing. And Diane, Howard, I'll let you talk about what Chrissie just, had just mentioned. I'm sure you've got some good thoughts on that.
Brilliant, Chrissie. I completely agree. We are obviously totally aligned on a lot of stuff here. I think one of the challenges, and I do a lot of role modeling, people are talking about, well, my mother-in-law always asks me this personal question and, how do I manage it? Or if I'm going back to work and why were you off? And so we act it out and, when someone asks a question that is deeply personal or inappropriate, what do you say? And well, I can't say that. When I'll say, well, what about, I'd rather not talk about it. And then someone comes back with another question, and then you got to think about, okay, I've made it very clear that I don't want to talk about it. And so it's appropriate for me to say, I'd rather not talk about it. Obviously, I would rather not talk about it.
Right?
How do you get comfortable with saying that? And I think by acting it out over and over, play acting with someone you love, because it's appropriate, right? You could say, I have explosive diarrhea. People usually don't lean in and go, tell me more about your diarrhea. That's our family excuse. Explosive diarrhea works every time. No one leans in and asks for more information. They go, okay, don't come. It's
Tell
fine.
me about that, please.
Tell me more. So I think acting out this, and people have this sense, well, they're my mother or they're my father. Nobody has the right to have this information unless you want to give it to them. I don't care who they are. No one in your life has the right to have your deeply personal information. You decide what you want to share. And if someone is trying to extract something that is deeply personal and you're not ready to do it, saying, I would rather not say, or I'm not comfortable sharing, is totally okay. But for people who don't know how to create boundaries and are uncomfortable, don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, it's deeply distressing and very difficult. And that's why I'm saying, because Chrissie, your point was exactly right. If you don't learn, if this was not modeled for you as a child, trying to learn as a young adult how to create boundaries, how to have relationships that work, that are not sort of one-sided, that you're not getting hurt. Very, very difficult. You should be learning from pop out of the womb and learn how to do this. But as we get older, we do get better at it. And I know as I've gotten older, and the gifts that come with being 50 is, I don't give a crap what anyone thinks anymore. You know what I mean? You love me, you don't love me.
It's so much better with age, doesn't it?
Life is just freeing, because we're always worried. When you have OCD, all you worry about is hurting other people. Yeah. And so that makes it so tough, because you do not want to hurt other people. You worry about harm to yourself and others. That's the core anxiety of OCD in my mind.
Well, we're coming up on an hour. I mean, we could probably sit here, the three of us, and talk for 4 hours.
Wow, this is so fun.
Yeah. But Chrissie, thank you so much for coming on. Where can my followers find you? Where can people find you? You've got a wonderful book called Pure O. You're very open and honest. You're a peer support specialist. Just let us know where people can find you and how you can help. Okay.
So I have a YouTube channel that probably is where most people find me, and where I get a lot of people. I can get help to refer worldwide. I can help refer you to therapists that can help with OCD. That's at, what is it? Chrissie Hodges. Chrissie Hodges. Pure OCD Advocate. You can also go to my website at chrissiehodges.com. That has more information about my story. It also has information about services. And on Instagram, I'm at Pure O Chrissie. So I post a ton of stuff about OCD on there. And then my nonprofit, OCD Game Changers. You can find us at Facebook at OCD Game Changers. And we've done a lot of really fun stuff during this COVID to help support and normalize what you may be going through emotionally during this time of uncertainty. So I highly encourage you to go over there. I'm always posting content and all this great resources from the therapists and advocates in our community. We do have such a wonderful community of creative people really trying to spread awareness about OCD. So thank you both for having me on. Diane, it was just such a pleasure to get to meet you and talk with you. You are so my people.
And me too, Chrissie. I don't think the two of us could look more different. We were talking about your hair and mine, but you obviously, we are highly aligned on a lot of stuff. So it's been great to meet you.
Yeah. And Corey, I love you, man. You're one of my favorites. I always appreciate everything that you do and the conversations that you open up as a male. It's so important and you are such a great role model for people to see that it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay. It's okay to have these conversations, and it's actually going to make relationships better. So thank you. And I love you.
Thank you so much. Love you too, Chrissie. And we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Chrissie.
Bye.
Oh, yes. So that's the great Chrissie Hodges. She's
Yeah, that was a gift. Thank you, Corey.
Yeah, her passion for change in the system. She's done a lot. Like in Colorado, how the police used to deal with mental health and all that. She's done a lot of advocacy on that, where it's changed. Some of the laws actually in Colorado, and she's fought for better care of people with mental health issues. And it's just so much for OCD what she's done. I was blessed to meet her. She's her book is great. Her Game Changers is awesome. But Diane, just to wrap up here, a lot was talked about today, and we'll have Chrissie on again. But it just seems that ultimately the bottom line was communication and boundaries between partners. I think that's probably what came out of this, is being able to communicate, being able to set boundaries are just so important in a relationship, without setting a boundary where you're it's like a hard line where you're hurting your partner. And there's good boundaries, there's boundaries that are unacceptable as well, right? So it goes both ways, but communication seems to be the key.
And it's hard work, and it takes time. You don't figure it out right away. And so the way that you've talked about making sure that you communicate early on, I don't know if you want it on your profile, your dating profile, but maybe you do. And you know what? There's a lot of people who I think it's one of the great things that's coming from some of the younger generations, is actually talking about this stuff much more openly and early on, men and women talking about it. But recognizing it's a journey, it takes time. You're going to have to feel it out and keep checking in. But I have to completely agree with Chrissie that you having these conversations as a man, talking about the challenges of being vulnerable, of it being okay not to be okay. And I just think it's a powerful opportunity for other people to see someone who is a man being able to have those vulnerabilities and talk about these things that traditionally people haven't talked about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes from learning, right? I mean, it comes from lots of learning. And, one last thing before we go that I do want to touch on is, we didn't get a chance to talk about is if your partner is struggling with a mental health issue and you can see it, but they're not willing to go get the help. For me, then you have to take care of you. You have to and make a decision if that's a relationship that you want to stay in, because self-awareness, and I know a lot of people that in a relationship, one side will be self-aware and one side won't be. And that can be extremely damaging to a relationship. So what do you say to people that are in a relationship right now, their partner just won't recognize that they need help?
One part of mental illness, and it can be quite a challenge with certainly illnesses like bipolar, schizophrenia, sometimes with OCD, is insight. And insight means recognizing you have a problem. So most people who are struggling with OCD actually retain insight. They know this is over the top. My fears don't make sense. It's too much, but I can't stop having them. They keep coming back. But then with other disorders, people have no insight at all. Or sometimes when people are depressed, they don't have the sadness. A lot of men will tell me, I don't feel anything. So how can I be depressed? Or they're just irritable. Well, yeah, I'm irritable, but that doesn't mean depression. So trying to help someone to recognize, well, maybe this is a mental illness, when maybe their family doctor has said, no, I don't think it's a mental illness either. That's a huge challenge. And you're absolutely right. You can try. You're a loving partner. You want to help. But ultimately, if they're not able or willing to listen or to hear or to seek help, you do have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of your children. And so if you're not able to make a breakthrough after trying and trying, you do have to sometimes decide, maybe this isn't the relationship for me.
Yeah, and that's a tough decision to come to. But thank you so much, Diane. What a great show today. Tomorrow, I have another good friend of mine, former National Hockey League All-Star Clint Malarchuk. Clint, his story, of PTSD. Go online and take a look at him. He was the goaltender that got his jugular cut during a game, and really, by the grace of whatever God or whatever you believe in, was still with us then. And then he started to struggle with PTSD, OCD, all sorts of things in his life, mental health. Tried to take his own life at one point and survived that as well. And since then, he's come to the realization that he must be here for a reason still, surviving those two things. And he's become a mental health advocate and speaker on his story. And we have to call him Dr. Clinton Larchuk, though he does have a honorary doctorate we like to bug him about. But his story is absolutely incredible. So join us here tomorrow. I think we're going to go on at 2 p.m. if we can, Diane. I'll post it on my site. He's an incredible, I love him. He's another part of my group and good people. But thank you again, Diane, for today. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks. Bye.